Hello there, my name's Phil Williams and I would like to welcome you to Audio Angling, the podcast site of fishingfilmsandfacts.co.uk. Rod and line fishing for giant tunny, or blue fin tuna as we know them today, in British waters started back in the 1930s. Following a spate of reported sightings of huge fish by commercial herring boat crews working off the Yorkshire coast, in 1929, famous angler of his day Henry Stapleton Cotton headed out off the Scarborough coast to investigate, resulting in the hooking up and subsequent loss of two huge fish, which he was convinced were giant tuna. The following year, well-heeled big fish enthusiast Lorenzo Mitchell Henry followed Stapleton Cotton's lead, and on the 27th of August 1930, fishing 50 miles off the Yorkshire coast in the vicinity of the herring fleet, he boated Britain's first rod-caught bluefin tuna with a fish of 560 pounds. That same year saw a further 4 rod-caught tuna brought into Scarborough, weighing 392 pounds, 591 pounds, 630 pounds and 758 pounds, the latter of which, at the time, was a mere 23 pounds short of Zane Gray's 758 pound world record taken off Nova Scotia. From then on there was no looking back, with many more big fish taken by wealthy enthusiasts who could afford to hire local commercial fishing boats to take them out amongst the herring drifters, where in 1932 Colonel E.T. Peel finally broke Gray's world record with a 798 pounder, which was itself bettered the following year by that man Mitchell Henry, with a fish that still holds a British record for the species at 851 pounds. But arguably, the most outstanding tunny fishing feat of the time was that of Captain Cyril Hubert Frisbee VC, who over 5 consecutive days took 12 fish, 5 of which weighing between 461 and 658 pounds were taken during the same day. That's a measure of just how good Scarborough's tuna fishing was back then. But unfortunately, by the mid-1950s it was all over. The reason being that many of the herring boats which were essential in chumming up these big fish stopped working due to a combination of population collapse and regulation. So bad had things become that in 1956 an emergency symposium was held to try to find ways of halting the herring's decline. And with the loss of the herring fishery and the boats that attracted them went any possibility of locating the tuna, bringing to an end one of the most exciting chapters in British rod and line fishing. The last tunny or bluefin tuna caught in the North Sea was taken by wealthy businessman Harry Weatherly in 1954, and present when that fish was caught, along with many other of Weatherly's monster fish, was Scarborough commercial fisherman Bill Pashby, who is with me for this particular podcast today. So let's start by getting straight down to business by looking at your role in this particular historical episode.
When I first went tunny fishing, I was 12-year-old. I used to go for pleasure in summertime. And then when I left school, I went full-time working, catching tunny fish with Mr. Weatherly. End of the 50s, there wasn't another tunny fish caught on this coast. I left school in 1950.
What age was you then?
15.
And you went straight into commercial fishing?
Yes.
It was your father's boat, I take it?
Yes. The name of the boat was called Courage.
And primarily, what was the boat fishing for?
We were catching dogfish at the time out of Grimsby. And this particular time, we'd had a really good week, and Mr. Weatherly, who my dad used to take out, he rang up and he said, I want to hire your boat for 3 weeks. So my dad said, well, we're doing so well here. So Mr. Weatherly said, whatever you've made this week, I'll double it. So my dad said, come on, we're going home. We're going for 3 weeks holiday, which it was to us.
Presumably the tunny had always been there, so why all of a sudden did the prospect of catching them on rod and line take hold?
Well, it was money people, it was a sport, it was classed as sport. It wasn't like much because they were catching loads. But in the 30s, it was any amount of guys catching tunny fish in all kinds of boats, yachts, big yachts, private yachts. My dad says there was any amount of people wanting to hire your boat in the 30s, 20s and 30s.
And what exactly would a booking like that entail in terms of organisation?
The rules was you had to catch the fish in a small rowing boat. And in those days it was easy because there was any amount of ships catching herrings with drift nets. And you just had to go out from Scarborough 5, 6, 7 mile, and you'd come at these ships, and you'd say, "Have you seen any tunny fish?" And no, and but I would get on the radio, and he says, "Over there, the light flashing. That man has tunny fish round." So we just went from him to this light flashing, and there they were. Actually, we give him a crate of beer, like, you know, for his troubles. And it was so easy because as the herrings was dropping out the nets, the tunny fish was on top of the water. That was in the dark. And in the daylight, they used to go down. It was very rare that they came up in the daylight. So what we had to do was, while Mr. Weatherly had a fish on, we had to keep tossing herrings overboard to keep them round us. And one particular time, he caught 4 fish before breakfast. £743 was one of them, £589, £545, and the record fish was over £800.
So you'd approach one of these herring drifters when they were hauling the nets with fish falling free from them into the water, and the tuna, or the tunny as I know you prefer to call them, are darting about here, there and everywhere mopping them up. So what was the sequence of events your boat crew would follow, and how best would you approach these fish to get a successful outcome?
You had about 6 foot of trace. It was like piano wire, and rest was line. And my father would be stood at the side of the man with a hook baited, and when the fish was coming around, he'd throw the line over, and then my dad wasn't allowed to touch that anymore until he caught the fish and got it alongside, and my father had to put a gaff in its bottom lip, because it was tied out then, practically dead. And then we would be following the small boat in the big boat, and it was block and tackle then. We just load the tackle down and put a becket around its tail, and hooked it on and heaved it up and put it on deck.
And all of this was done from a small rowing boat, regardless of the distance out to sea?
Rowing boats, yes.
And you was actively involved in all of this, with your father and the client out in his boat?
Oh, yes. Sometimes I had to go and pull on the oars, because as soon as you had the fish on, you had to apply pressure by rowing. The fish would pull the boat stern first, and you would be sat forward on the oars, pulling the opposite way, and it would help to tire the fish out. But at the first, once you'd hooked the fish, you'd pull the oars in and let it run for a while, and it slowly tired out, and as it was tiring out, then you'd put oars out again and start rowing the opposite way to tire it out more.
So how long might a typical encounter with such a big fish last?
Well, Mr. Weatherly, he caught them 4 fish before breakfast, and about an hour. He could catch one in an hour, could Mr. Weatherly. Some others took longer.
Was it always Harry Weatherly you had out with you, or did other people place bookings too?
Well, Mr. Weatherly was the only chap I went with, but before my father used to take different fellas out. He took Lady Broughton out. She used to take a long time to catch her fish.
When I was researching for this interview, I came across Lady Broughton on the internet. The picture I saw of her was of a bit of a looker, and very well connected to the aristocracy of Europe. A bit of a far cry from being out on a fishing boat based at Scarborough.
Well, they all stayed at Grand Hotel, because the Grand Hotel in Scarborough was the hotel for the rich, and some of them, the tunny fish guys, used to stay at the Tunny Club.
So what about Lady Broughton as a person? I heard she had quite a good repertoire of Anglo-Saxon swear words, and on occasion was also prone to wetting herself during the exertion of playing a big fish.
My dad used to say that she was always swearing, and if it was bad weather, he had to go up to the Grand Hotel and she sort of showed him off, you know, this is my boatmaster sort of thing. I don't think my mother liked it, but here we are. It was interesting. It was like a holiday to us. I mean, you went out and you were out for 2 days, and then you came back and you had a day in, and then you went for another 2 days. 10th of August, that's when herrings used to come off Scarborough. Nearly all us on that day, 10th of August, and that's when all Ooh, hundreds of ships. There was, you name it, there was Dutch, French, German, Russians, Scotch, English, boats catching herrings. It was like a town. You went out to harbour, said, in dark, and you could look east from Scarborough, and it was just like another town with lights. That season went on, right from 10th of August, well, about the end of October. The herrings slowly moved south, so they were catching plenty of herrings off the low stuff eventually, and the tunnies used to just follow the herrings.
And did none of the other nearby ports also try to muscle in on the tunny fishing as the herrings progressively migrated to the south?
Not that I know of.
No.
Not that I know of.
What was Whitby's involvement in all of this then?
There wasn't many going out to Whitby catching them, funny enough. It was Scarborough. But I say, in the 20s and 30s, there would have been, I suppose. But in the 50s, no. There was only one chap who used to go to Whitby, but it was all Scarborough. The fish what you caught used to be on shore for charity in a hut with plenty of ice round them. And when that was going off, they dumped that and put another one in. And I remember at Bamford's on Sandside, he got one and he advertised it, and there was a great big queue, and it wasn't very nice. But nowadays, I've been told if you catch one, and you just have to get in touch with China, they'll come through and they'll give you 100,000 for one, a full-grown one. But they were sighted as tunny fish. We lost track of them end of 50s. There was never one caught. But 3 years ago, they were sighted off island, and there was one or two caught. And then they disappeared. And the last time they saw them was in the English Channel. And that's the last report I've heard of.
So, to keep on the right side of the Tunny Club rules, you'd take a small boat out with you to fish from. Would that be towed at the back of your bigger boat, or would it be put in from the deck when either the weather was right, or you located big fish picking up the herrings at the side of one of the herring drifters?
Well, we used to tow it if it was fine weather, but if it became bad weather, we got it on board.
And would you still fish in the bad weather?
No, if it was bad weather, but sometimes we got caught in bad weather, 70 or 80 miles off, so we'd get the small boat aboard.
So you'd get as far off as that, would you, on a regular basis?
Oh, yes. We once were 80, 90 mile off, and we came at these Danish boats, and they were catching tunny fish for a living. What they were doing was they had a rod, and they threw the bait overboard, and as soon as the tunny fish took hold, there's a guy pressed a button, and electric current went down the line and stunned it. Got it alongside. We laid and watched this, and this was towards the end of the 50s. And a guy stood forward with a gun. He walked aft, shot it in the head. Another guy bent over, put a strap round its tail, heaved it up, straightened out fish room, and we timed him. He got 5 fish down the fish room within half an hour. Middle of 50s, that. And Danes were catching them all the time then. We didn't know that. And some were catching them with pellets. Boys took the line out, and a big boy, and they'd follow the boy till the fish got tired, and they'd pick the boy up and got it aboard.
So tell us a little bit more about Harry Weatherly, who it seems was possibly the last person to catch a giant tunny from Scarborough, and presumably from your boat.
Mr. Weatherly, he wouldn't go down the cabin. He had a tent built on deck in front of the wheelhouse. It was well built, and that's where he slept, on deck.
He wasn't prone to seasickness, was he?
Well, he could be. He could be. But he had a nice tent on deck, and it was well secured. My Uncle Tom, he took a guy out in his boat, and he got the world record fish, which was 820 pounds, I believe it was. I know it was a record. And I was with him for pleasure at the time. I was still at school.
And you actually witnessed the catching of that fish?
Yes.
And what about Mitchell Henry? Allegedly he was a bit of a tyrant. I've read all sorts about him, and obviously from what went on, and stuff that's well documented, he didn't take too kindly to having his record beaten by John Headley Lewis, particularly as Headley Lewis was a mere farmer and not a true gentleman of the British Tunny Club. So he complained about the weight of the rope around the fish's tail and had Headley Lewis's claim thrown out.
Yes, well, my Uncle Tom, he took the guy out, what got the record, and the Whitby people, what caught one, said the strop round the tail, what my Uncle Tom's fish was weighed with, it was too heavy, and it wasn't. It wasn't.
What was the weight difference between these two fish?
2 pound heavier. They were arguing over it, but nothing was done.
Now I know you're not an angler, but what can you tell us about the actual tackle used to catch some of these huge fish?
Well, you had an ordinary line, and you had to have, from your line to the hook, you had to have a trace. Anyway, the Tunny Club rules was, this trace was so thick, when the water was clear in daylight, you had a job to catch them. So Mr. Weatherly said, I'll catch them next year in daylight. And my dad said, oh, how are we going to do it? He said, you wait and see. And he came with piano wire, which was a lot thinner than the club rules. And he could hook them light and out in daylight. Right. It was very, very thin.
And what were the rods and reels like back then?
Oh, they were good. They were very expensive, was the reels.
The reels would be huge centre pins then, which is presumably where the term Scarborough reel came from. So it was just a rod, a reel and a trace at the end of the line with a big hook baited with a herring. But what about a sinker lead? Or did you not need one with the fish being so high up in the water column?
They were all round you. They were all round you. Any amount around you. When the water was clear at daylight, you could see far enough down. He always wanted to hook a whale. Well, there's always whales among tunny fish, which are all feeding off the herrings. And this particular day, he hooked one, and off we were going. And I was in the small boat with my dad and Mr. Weatherly, and I had to pull oars in. We're going really, really fast. And there was any amount of ships in that area. Well, we were going straight for one ship, and my dad had to just cut the line. Otherwise, we'd have smacked right into him. There was any amount of whales then, blowfish, yeah.
I suppose you could find yourself in a similar position being towed about by a big tunny in amongst the working herring boats.
Well, funny enough, Mr. Weatherly, it was very good. When we had a fish on, sometimes you were going for a Dutchman or a Frenchman, you know, because they would do a lead all in the nets, and he could make the fish go one way or other. He was clever that way. I don't know how he did it, but he could sort of steer his way through with the fish on the hook.
What about when you got such a huge fish to the side of a rowing boat? Did you ever experience any fun and games at that point?
Well, it was after half an hour, the fish was really, really tiring out. And the more you pulled on the oars, it tired it out. And then you just go alongside. And once the trace was up, my dad was allowed to handle the line then. Because you're only like 4 or 5 foot off the hook. And he'd have a boat hook in his hand, and he'd have the trace in his left hand, and he'd just put the hook in its bottom lip and tie it alongside. And the big boat would come and block and tackle up and down.
No problems then with it thrashing about or finding enough energy for one last dive?
No. Well, they made sure it was tied out before they got it alongside.
So having watched all of this with some very big fish coming to the boat, were you ever tempted to give it a try? Or did you ever have a go yourself on the days when you didn't have paying clients on board?
Yes, I did. The two of us left on the big boat, and while they were off with fish, they were still all round us, so we rigged a line up, me and Herbert Nicholson, and we didn't have a rod, but we had plenty of rope aboard, and we baited a hook, threw it overboard. Within seconds there was a fish on, and we had the line round a cleat so we could slack it out, and then when we come to the end of the line we had to make it fast, and the big boat was actually moving, and all of a sudden the line parted because there was so much weight. Yeah, but we did try.
Why were you never tempted to have a proper go with a rod and a line?
No. My Uncle Tom, he caught one by himself. He You know, they got the record, and the tunny, the fellow he had out with him, he was having a sleep, so he had to go himself, and he caught one. Because when he woke up, this tunny fella, where's that come from, he said, I've just caught it.
So you're out there amongst the herring drifters. You get the message that there are some very big fish picking up the dropouts from the nets, and you hightail it over there to put a bait amongst them. What sort of numbers of tunny might you typically see looking to get a free meal?
Oh, 30, 40. Yes, 30, 40. No, and it was a sight, daylight, but water was clear, you know. Summertime water was clear when you got off a bit. And looking down, it was a marvellous sight. It really was. Just like little minnows swimming about and massive fish.
What kind of sizes were these fish able to get up to? Because while the record stands at 851 pounds, there could well have been other bigger fish out there which either never hooked up or were never landed.
Well, there might have been, but I don't think I ever saw one as bigger than that. No.
What do you reckon the average size was then?
I would say the average size was about £600.
That's some average. What about numbers of fish? What's the best catch either yourselves or, for that matter, any of the other boats recorded in a single trip?
Well, we caught 4 in one day. I didn't know anybody else catching any more than that in one day. It might have been before my time.
Considering that the clientele that could afford to hire a boat like yours for days on end were all well-heeled and conditioned to a lifestyle that most of us can only dream about, there must have been something extra special about the tunny scene to tempt them away from this luxury and persuade them to spend days on end in basic conditions, then suffer a physical mauling from such a huge hard-fighting fish. It must have been something of a culture shock for them, particularly if rough weather set in. So what do you think it was that motivated these people in such a way?
Well, they all enjoyed it. Yeah, but if it got too rough, my father wouldn't let them go in small boats. That was the agreement, which was common sense, really, isn't it?
No motor launches, then, to make life a little bit easier, because one thing's for sure, it sounds like most of these people could have afforded it.
The rule was you had to catch it in a small boat. They weren't allowed to catch them on the big boat.
When you do a Scarborough tunny fishing search on the internet, the same few names continually crop up. Being the record holder, and I suppose because of his alleged uncompromising nature, Mitchell Henry is obviously the main man. But your man, Mr. Weatherly, also made his fair share of tunny fishing history. So tell us a little bit more about Harry Weatherly, the person.
Mr. Weatherly lived in Teddington, and he was into hydraulics, and his son flew Spitfires during the war. He invited my dad over to Teddington, and that summer my dad was telling him all about hydraulic winches, because we had a hydraulic winch aboard at the time. Anyway, unbeknown to my dad, he had this factory and every machine was driven by hydraulics. And my dad felt daft when he went in the factory and he was showing him round, every machine was driven by hydraulics, and my dad had been trying to tell him somewhere before all about. And he put hydraulics into the Spitfire, and he put hydraulics into the Churchill tank. When he came through to Scarborough, he used to come in a Rolls Royce, him and his wife, and used to stay at the Grand Hotel, and his wife used to sit all day long in the Rolls Royce, and the driver in his uniform let him go off for a few hours. And his wife used to just sit watching all kids play on the beach. Anyway, when we were in harbour, with me being youngest in crew, I had to go about with him. And we went to Nat West Bank, drove up in his Rolls Royce, and there was no one-way streets in them days. Went straight up, straight outside Nat West, and I went in with him. And he said, I want to draw £400 out, please. And I was stood there, and the guy behind the desk, he counted out £400, and he said, oh, take that away, I want new pound notes. So he had to take it away and get brand new pound notes for him. They were a really nice couple. He used to bring all his own food, mostly fruit, all in tins, and they were kept in his tent. And he always had plenty of booze aboard at boat, because he went alongside of a ship and a bottle up, you know, and he could get all information he wanted, where all tunny fish was, you know. I think they all did that. And he was a very nice man. They're all nice guys, you know, plenty of money and looked after us. Mr. Weatherly, when he used to stay at the Grand Hotel, when his time was up, he used to go around and give the head chef, the head barman, a £5, which was a lot of money then. Oh, you give everybody at the hotel a tip. He's a very generous man.
And you get a tip yourself?
Oh, aye, yeah.
So when they were out on the boat, these people had to rough it like the rest of the crew. But on shore, it was back to the height of luxury at the Grand Hotel. Leastways for those who could afford it. But presumably not everybody could, because at the Tunny Club HQ, which is now a chip shop, though it's still called the Tunny Club, besides meeting up there and enjoying a few drinks, it was also possible to lodge there too, I believe.
The Tunny Club started in 1935, the year I was born. And sometimes there would be two fellas come and they'd share the bill. There's only about 2 bedrooms. Downstairs there's a bar and just a big room and a great big cupboard for stowing all their rods.
And when they caught these fish and brought them ashore, after weighing on the quay and having a few pictures taken, that was it. They had absolutely no commercial value back then.
No, they just used to put them on show, and when it went rotten, they put another one there. But they were you just dumped, and now they're worth a fortune. But I have tasted them, and I didn't like taste. They're a bit stringy. I prefer shark to them. I've tasted shark, they're far tastier.
So the only real value of the tunny fishery from your point of view was as a means of earning yourselves what was at the time a very good wage that wasn't dependent in the same way as commercial fishing is on getting a good result. Bookings presumably had to be honoured.
Even if it was bad weather, they never got off for that. See, they still had to pay that money. It was guaranteed money, you know. Once, Mr. Weatherly was a full week in harbour. We never got out, and still got money.
How many years did Mr. Weatherly fish with you for?
Oh, he used to come with my granddad before war. And after war, he come with my dad because my granddad retired, like.
And when did he fish with you last?
It's 30 years since he was here last. And he stayed at the Grand Hotel. His wife had died. He was getting on. And my mother went to see him. And it wasn't the Grand Hotel like it used to be. This is what my mother said. So she got him out and got him in a better hotel up South Cliff. And we all went to see him one night and had a meal with him. Yeah, and he went back home. Within a year he died of old age.
So there must have been quite a strong bond between yourselves and Harry Weatherly, despite the obvious differences in wealth.
Oh, I remember once, you know, when Hot Fleet was here, Scotch Fleet, lovely ships. We were in the harbour and we were all on deck talking, and this Scotch ship, brand new, came in. Nan McMurray, they called her, varnished. He said, would you like one like that? Well, to me dad, like. He said, I can't afford one like that. He said, I'll buy you one. No, it's true. And I heard me dad say, no, you're not right, Mr. Weatherly. Anyway, afterwards I said, Dad, why didn't he was keen, we wanted to buy one like that. He said, if he'd bought one for me, I'd have been beyond to me for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? That's how they were. Yeah, we would have bought him.
Prior to all these big fish, including world records turning up off Scarborough, Nova Scotia off the east coast of Canada was the place to go looking for them, and no doubt a lot of people over there fishing for them would have been rich Americans. So when this lot kicked off in the North Sea, did you see a sudden influx of Americans coming over? Or was it pretty much something that only rich English people did?
In the 20s and 30s, yes, but not in the 50s. See, I didn't start well in the 50s. Before the 50s, at school for pleasure, but there was no Americans then. I know there was in 20s and 30s, because I heard my dad say that he used to come from all over.
Yet despite all of this money slushing about, despite the fact that world records were being caught, and despite the fact that angling history was also being made, though people at the time would probably be unaware of that, other than a few old black and white photographs plus one short piece of movie action I've seen on the internet, nobody, it seems, was bothered much about recording any of what was going on.
No. I mean, some days when the water was really calm and so clear, and you could see down a long way, 40 or 50 fish all over the shore, you know. And if you'd had a good camera then, you could have took the pictures, you know.
And no newsreel teams wanting to accompany you?
Once I'm aboard.
Do you know when the last tunny was caught off Scarborough, and who caught it?
Well, as far as I know, my Uncle Tom caught the last fish in his boat, which was the record fish, at the end of the 50s.
So looking back, what can you recall now about the numbers of fish being caught? For example, what would a typical catch for a trip be, and how many fish might you expect to see over a season?
We used to average about 2 to 3 fish in 2 days. But we once caught 4 in 2 days.
And did you ever blank?
If it was bad weather, you come back and it was a blank. You know, but nearly every time you sighted fish and caught them.
What sort of numbers then might you catch in a season?
I would say we averaged 2 a day. Normally we did about 6 weeks tunny fishing. And they were thrown away. Nobody wanted them.
And your grandfather, I believe, was given a special presentation on the catching of the 100th fish.
Yes, my granddad is on this photograph here, with a tunny fish tail alongside of him, what was cured, and Mr. Weatherly, who we used to take out, he presented him with that tail, because it was his 100th fish he'd caught. My granddad in my granddad's boat. That was 1949.
So when did things start to slip into decline, or was it more sudden than that? What do you think was the key factor behind it?
End of 50s, there was none caught. What happened was the government banned drift netting for herrings. Well, it was so easy to find tunny fish because you went to the first drift netter who was catching herrings, and you just said, "Have you seen any tunine fish?" No, but I get on the radio for you. Light flashing over there. They were there, you went over there. Well, when they banned all these ships from catching them, you went out, and it was hard to find them. So I'd say with their herrings, odd herrings dropping out at net, it kept the tunny fish on the surface.
So the tunny weren't themselves wiped out, you just lost the ability to find them when the herring boats stopped loose feeding them. Presumably then it was back to the commercial fishing.
Yeah, there's still plenty of dogfish about in summertime. I used to land at Grimsby, it was a very good market. You couldn't sell them here, but there's also a good market at Grimsby for dogfish. Of course, when they went to London, they were called rock salmon. I didn't like the taste of them. I tried them. They weren't very tasty to me.
Were they spur dogs?
Yes, they had 2 spikes on the back. You used to skin them, and then the majority went to London.
And how were you catching them?
Long lines.
Did you ever pick up anything else of interest on the lines besides the spurs?
Well, if the bait was fresh, dogfish would eat anything. They would eat anything. But like skate and cod, they wouldn't tackle it because the bait was salted and it had gone brown. And it's very rare you got a fresh fish with old bait. Yeah, you went with fresh bait, you used to get skate and odd cod, you know. And then you used to have to dump monks in the 50s because nobody wanted them. And now they're top of the range. Monkfish, used for scampi. Yeah, we've done tons of monkfish, and it used to be any amount. We used to dump them because we couldn't sell them. Now there is fish gone. Yeah, there used to be any amount of skate, they've disappeared. And halibuts, you don't see halibut now. And turbots. There used to be plenty of turbots. We once caught 500 stone in 2 days. We used to work any amount of long lines, 12 score hooks on one line. You had 3 men baiting aft all day. When you were 6-handed, 6 in the crew. But to find dogfish, it was so easy. You had a line with about 100 hooks on. You'd shoot that, and you used to leave it for 10 minutes, no more. Because if they were there, they would be on hooks. And then you'd steam another half an hour, put another feeler in, with 100 hooks on, and till you come at them, and then bang your lines in, you know. And within 24 hours, you could be full up. Yeah, fishing was full in 24 hours. You'd be back in Grimsby landing. Yeah. One particular time, tide suited, dogs at the bottom of River Humber. Right at the bottom of River Humber. And we landed every morning that week and out again. So we landed every day, and it was front page, Evening News, Grimsby, record catch. I forget how many kit we landed, but all the total was £1,260, which was a lot of money then, 1951. £1,260. And it suited all that week with tides. If we missed tide, we'd get penned in, you know, and then get penned out again, which you used to do, like. But the last day, they wouldn't let us in. Tide was awkward, so we had to go into basin, and my dad organised a wagon to come down, and we piled them all onto a wagon and took them round to the fish market. 1964, I bought a ship. Me and my brother bought a ship for trawling, and we once got this mining net, and it was shaped like a torpedo. Anyway, when we hauled, all the net was torn, and this mine was hanging out the cut end. Well, we could have reached down and cut it adrift and let it go, but we didn't. We got a strap round it. We hove it aboard and put it on the other side of the ship and lashed it up. Put a new net on and shot away again. Well, this area where we were working, there was 7 more ships, and I knew one of the skippers. He was in the Navy, taming mines, working among mines, and I called him up, and he says, you want to get out of there? That mine has 10 booby traps, the way I described it. So, and one of the booby traps was vibration, and another one was letting it go, pressure of water building up would have set it off. Anyway, cut a long story short, I got on radio to Leconfield, and I told them, I said, get off of Scarborough 2 mile, drop your anchor and get the hell out of it. Which we did do. A cobble come off and took us in. Next morning, there was this officer and 3 ratings, and we took them out in a small boat. And I says, you won't be blowing my ship up, will you? He says, we might have to do if we can't get inside. Anyways, his brother was killed during the war, taming this mine. It's a German mine. And what killed him, he used to say, right, I'm doing so-and-so now. And he's putting his hand in a bit further. Heat of his hand blew him up. Yeah. Anyway, they got the detonator out. And they went out outside of Scarborough, and they could hear the bang for miles and miles. And they closed the marine drive, you know, and although we were 2 mile off. It was, and if it'd been a English mine, we would have got a lot of money for damage what was done to net and that. But with it being German, we didn't get a penny. And I must tell you this, a fortnight later, we got another mine in net, but it was a round one with spikes on, and you could see inside of it, so we weren't frightened of that. So we put that on deck, and I got on radio again. And when we came in, there was somebody there from Leconfield, and oh, you'll get some money for this. It's all right. It's not. They went round it like, oh, you're safe with this one, like, you know. Anyway, we got about 400 quid. Yeah, and anyway, they said, oh, when you go to sea tomorrow, dump it. So we had it lashed aft, you know. Anyway, next morning we came round to go to sea. Mine had gone. But what was outside of us, he'd bloody pinched it. When he come in at night time, he claimed he got 400 quid for it and all.
So what sort of changes have you witnessed in the state of the North Sea fishery between the mid-1950s and the time when you retired?
Oh, stocks went right down. 50s, 60s and 70s was the best. And after that, there wasn't the cod, there wasn't the fish like there was. Technologies killed it. Bigger ships and all the gadgets in the wheelhouse, what you had, a fish hadn't a chance. And then they put limitations on us, government, so we all had to sell out to get rid of, because we couldn't cope with the demands of what they were putting on us. This particular time, we were real restricted, and we had a logbook in the wheelhouse, and I said to the crew, look, we've only got 6 boxes we can catch, then we'll have to go in. So I said, we'll shoot away. We towed 3.5 hours and hauled. Net was full of cod. Oh, what a sight. Net blew out of water, with cod full of air. We landed early morning, thought I'd take the chance. Anyway, got caught. The fine it went into thousands and thousands. I can't remember what the figure was now. Or take the tie up. 8 days, end of every month, for a year tie up. So we took the tie up. Well, it was one of the best years I had because we were in and out. Because we knew we were going to have 8 days and it was a lovely fine year that. No bad weather like, And we landing, ice, oil, grub, out again, straight away. And one of the best years I've had. So we weren't punished really.
An 8 days holiday every month.
8 days, yeah. And then they put different penalties on you. And, we just had to get out of it. Just had to get out of it now. There's only 3 trawlers left. No, 2 trawlers left in Scarborough now. And Whitby's only 4. There was a meeting and next year they won't be able to cope. They're only allowed to work 90 days a year now. And they're knocking that down. So they'll be selling the ships if they can get rid of them.
When I first came into sea angling, the Yorkshire coast was literally alive with cod. Then maybe 10 years ago the stocks began to nosedive. But over the last couple of years there have been very clear signs of recovery.
Because you're limited in what you can catch now. There's not the ships now. No, I mean, there used to be 30 trawlers out of here. Now there's only 2. Grimsby. Grimsby, 50s, 60s, there was 500 big trawlers. Went to Iceland and all over, clear of the small ships. Then there was Hull. All that's gone. Grimsby and Hull used to be booming. It's like ghost towns now. Grimsby is. Common sense in it, really. But, you see, the thing is, you aren't allowed to catch this. But you catch another species, and it's dead, and you have to throw it away, which is silly, really. This is what we all got out with. You just break your eye. For miles around there's dead fish where you've dumped, and it's all size fish, but you aren't allowed to catch that particular species. It was heartbreaking to some really fish. Because, it isn't all alive when you pull your net up. I would say 90% of it was dead. And it just died, you know what I mean? But it's fresh.
So what was the herring fishery like back then in its heyday? And was it really the key ingredient so far as anglers were concerned in wanting to catch big tunny? Herrings then kept a lot of people on the East Coast employed. Plus, I suppose, indirectly, people like yourselves taking well-heeled anglers out too.
There was lots of Scotch lasses used to follow the fleet, gipping the herring. Lodge on here, when Key Street was Key Street, loads and loads of cottages, well, they knocked them all down. That's where they used to be put up, And the boyfriends would be on ships, and they'd be all day gipping herrings. And majority of herrings were all salted in barrels, and majority of herrings were sent to Russia. Yeah, all gipped and salted. There's plenty of old photographs in Scarborough with them on pier, all gipping all pier, right away around. Far Pier, Lighthouse Pier, back at Fish Market, all over, all on seafront. Yeah.
So, contrary to what I thought, and much of what I'd read, though there was increasing commercial pressure on North Sea tuna population numbers, it wasn't direct overexploitation that brought the fishing for them to an end. Rather, it seems it was the sudden inability to locate the fish in the absence of the herring boats hauling the nets. Indeed, there have been a number of occasional reported sightings, and even huge dead tuna washed up along Britain's North Sea coast in recent times, not to mention the very impressive but sadly short-lived resurgence of rod and line fishing for them off the west coast of Ireland, particularly by Donegal skipper Adrian Malloy, who took the Irish record up to a staggering £968 back in 2001. Unfortunately, over recent times, that run appears to have dried up to the point where no boats have caught one now for several years. In fact, on the very day that this interview was recorded in November 2010, the European Union activated a ban on the catching of bluefin tuna from the Mediterranean and the Eastern Atlantic. That said, you can't help but wonder how many of those Irish fish made it around the top of Scotland into the North Sea, as they used to do all those years ago. If ever there was a right time to go out there and take a look, it would have been between 2000 and 2005. But, as Bill Pashby has already pointed out, without the commercial scale chumming of the herring boats, just exactly where would you look?